Hi, I'm Jim Spina. I'm a nuclear physicist, a recovered alcoholic, and the author of a best-selling book, I Almost Murdered a Complete Stranger. I want to talk to you briefly about my experience with alcoholism. I was a highly functional alcoholic. You've probably heard that phrase. It's a little bit of an oxymoron, but it is true that alcoholics all have a unique experience and relationship with alcohol. About 10% of the world's population is alcoholic. That percentage really doesn't change and hasn't changed over time. That gives us roughly 33 million Americans that are alcoholic. There's a common misperception about alcoholics. If I were to mention to you, close your eyes and visualize an alcoholic, chances are you're not going to see somebody in a business suit running a board meeting, successful, doing a scientist. Chances are your image is going to be something like or surrounded by a context of unemployed, perhaps not clean shaven, ill-kempt, poorly dressed, maybe even in a gutter. That's the misperception. Certainly, that is a place that alcoholism will take the alcoholic and well beyond. Alcoholism only has one purpose in an alcoholic's life, and that's to murder them, and it will get them alone first. And as you can imagine, you'll bounce off several bottoms, which include very often the picture you look like. But the people in everyday society that you interact with, there's a lot of alcoholics amongst them. I speak as formerly one. It's not the person that has lost their job necessarily. I retired as a senior executive from a Fortune 500 energy company. I'm a nuclear physicist. My career was highly successful. I was married. I have 2 daughters. I have 4 grandchildren, a good relationship with both of my daughters. And I worked well with others. I had a great number of business associates, friends, and I still have some very best friends. Wait a minute now, that doesn't sound like an alcoholic. Oh, trust me, I was an alcoholic. I was an alcoholic. And I became an alcoholic in the worst case of alcoholism, which is where we all eventually get to. My point is there are different models for alcoholism, so I'm going to simplify it. The one that's clearly true is that we pass through different phases of alcoholism. There's what I'm going to call the initial phase, and that's the romance period with alcohol. You first start drinking. I had my first drink when I was 13, and I knew I was an alcoholic at that point in time. I didn't become an alcoholic with that first drink. I just became a supporting player in my destiny. I'm genetically predispositioned towards alcoholism. My father died of alcoholism at age 60. He was a beautifully brilliant, talented man, and I love him dearly. After that initial phase of alcoholism, and the duration of it varies from person to person to person, this disease is an equal opportunity destroyer. It doesn't care what race you are, ethnicity, what sex you are. None of that matters to alcoholism. But everybody has a different experience with their alcoholism because we are all unique. The initial phase could be 6 months, could be 10 years. Then there's the adaptive phase. The adaptive phase is the phase where the alcoholic's mind, their psyche, mind, will, and emotion, and their body has learned to adapt itself and function with the presence of alcohol. Either periodically, either in maintenance drinking, binge drinking, but it has had to adapt. We are adaptive creatures, if nothing else. We will always adapt to the larger context we place our body in. That is called the functional phase, and it's different for every alcoholic. My father, unfortunately, I inherited alcoholism, most likely from my father. It's not his fault. I also inherited his tendency towards a prolonged and sustained adaptive phase. For many alcoholics, during the early stages of the adaptive phase, their body not only learns how to function the same, in many cases they use it to adapt and function better at certain tasks. That doesn't mean, by the way, you can hear the guy, oh, I drive better after a couple of drinks. That's not what I'm talking about, and you don't. There's been a number of statistical studies and clear observational testing data that shows nobody drives better after the consumption of alcohol, any alcohol. It's a central nervous system depressant and it slows your response time. I'm talking about the fact that your body learns to adapt to you imbibing upon alcohol at different phases in your life and can function. That's where the term a functional alcoholic comes from. The adaptive phase could last 6 months. The adaptive phase could last 5 years, 10 years. In my case, my initial phase was about 5 years. Where I place these, with the way I'm describing them to you, there's no clear-cut bins. You can't really tell when you progress from one to the other. They're just gray markers. My adaptive phase was probably about 30 years. 30 years. And during that time, I progressed. I started out as an engineer in a company with over 10,000 employees and retired as a senior executive with thousands and thousands of people working for me. I did well at my job. I wasn't a phony. I studied. I got my graduate degree from Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory during this time period, as well as a number of other accomplishments. I am not bragging. I just want to dispel the misnomer, the myth that's out there that suggests that because people are in society and functioning, and perhaps even functioning well, and data shows, if you just listen to what I said, depending on where you're catching them, there's 34 million alcoholics in America. How many of those are in a highly functional phase right now? There's no data on that, but you could do a little math. I would say at least 10 million, probably more like 15 million, which means you interact with, maybe work for an alcoholic, or they work for you. Why am I sitting on the stairs? Because after thinking about it, you always hear falling down the stairs. Oh, I fell down the stairs. He fell down the staircase. I had a period in my life where I was falling upstairs, and that's the term that I used. It's a metaphor. I was an alcoholic. Alcoholic is a chronic, progressive, and fatal affliction. Means it's progressive. However, during its progression in my adaptive phase, I was prospering. If you fall down the stairs, I fell upstairs for a long period of time. When I was in 2006, I got diagnosed with cirrhosis and started bleeding, upper GI hemorrhaging from a number of associated medical conditions. I bled out finally in 2016 on my kitchen floor. My daughter found me about 8 hours later. I was taken to a trauma center, stabilized, bled out there, was resuscitated, hypothermic, comatose, intubated, tube fed, and on a mechanical ventilator. And when I came out of my coma, alcoholism had been lifted from me. But let me tell you, the journey is the same for every alcoholic. I might have been falling upstairs for 25 years, but damn, the top of the stairs makes a long fall. And lying on a cold floor, all alone, bleeding out, unable to move, knowing you're a dead man, it's a long fall. Alcoholism is 100% fatal unless it has been conquered, and it can only be conquered through a spiritual experience. I hope and I pray that you listen to me. And I hope and pray, if you are suffering from the disease of alcoholism, that you do what has to be done. The first thing is that you have to stop keeping your secret. It's a bitch. I know. You can do it anonymously through groups like AA, through private counseling. It can be done. Reach out and tell somebody about your problem. I don't care if you're highly functional, highly adaptive, successful. I can't tell you how many people have told me look at me. I've got a nice home, 2 cars, a wife and kids. I can't be an alcoholic. That was my story. And not far from here, I bled out. And by the way, that wasn't my first bleed. I'd been hospitalized a number of times and given blood transfusions and told each time I would not survive the next major GI bleed that I had. Well, I did survive a few more, but they were right. Ultimately, I didn't. I'd rather fall from here than the top of the stairs. I was like Icarus that flew too close to the sun. Alcohol consumed me, and I had to have more and more and more and more and more of it. Because with an alcoholic's mind, if a little is good, more is always better. And I got very close to the sun. The wax on my wings melted. It's a long way to the earth. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this story. Thanks a lot.